but we'll go ahead and get started. So Trina, take it away.
All right. So Laura and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule for joining us this morning. We also want to wish you congratulations on making it through the first half of this fall semester. We know it's been a rough one. So Laura and I, we've been actively reaching out and listening to faculty and other support staff, trying to search for training needs. Laura thought this would be a great midpoint in the semester to talk about student check-ins. So that's our topic today. You might have seen Don Saussure's recent YouTube video in his Engage the Sage series. He covered check-ins along with other mid-semester tips. So if you haven't seen it yet, we're going to drop that link into the chat. Let me do that real quick while I'm thinking about it. There we go. All right, so you've gone through the pivot of remote teaching and are hopefully feeling more comfortable and confident in online teaching, but we're still in the very early stages. So at this point, you might be asking how to measure student engagement or how to kind of take the temperature of your class or individual students. So if you're not seeing your students in a physical classroom or even in real time online, you might be missing a lot of those visual cues and other common things that you relied on for interacting with students. Maybe you got to class early or stayed late to chat with students. We're going to talk today about some ways to check in with your students to see how they're doing both personally and academically. So at this point, you might be thinking, but I send out my TVAL at the end of each semester for student feedback, and how is this different? So when we talk about student check-ins, we're not really talking about a formal process like TVALs. So a check-in allows you a lot of flexibility. You can decide when to check in, what you ask of your students. Also keep in mind that a TVAL is offered at the end of the semester, so you're reviewing it often after those students provide the feedback. They're finished with your class, grades have been set, they're focusing on next term, and maybe you are too. So TVALs and any form of feedback can provide advantages and provide great feedback so you can improve your course for that future term, but using a student check-in now or throughout the semester can have that immediate impact on your teaching and the students' learning. So we would encourage you to act early and often, and there's still time to do that this fall.
Okay, poll time. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a Zoom poll and ask you to respond. And so as you are looking at this poll, take a few minutes to answer them and then wait. You can also type into the chat any reservations that you have about doing student check-ins, reasons you have avoided doing them, or why you love doing them if you do them. Go ahead, and if you feel comfortable, go ahead and unmute yourself and add your thoughts as well. And I will go ahead and add this to our results in just a second after folks have replied. Okay, sharing the results. Looks like a couple of people have done it and they do it in every class. Someone else tried it once and another person hadn't tried it yet. So lots of different tools that we can use, and we'll talk about those some more as well. Several people said they used other tools as well. Do you want to share what you've used?
I use Google Forms.
Okay, great.
Josh was talking about finding time to follow up in a meaningful way in the
It
chat.
is tricky. It's definitely important that we follow up, because asking them for feedback and then doing nothing with it isn't really helpful. Great point. All right, we'll go ahead and go on and close. Results. Close that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why we want to check in with our students. There's many different reasons for student check-ins. At the beginning of the semester, it can help you to connect with your students personally and begin to build rapport. We've talked quite a bit this spring and fall about doing surveys with your students to kind of check in with their technology access, right? But you can move beyond this with the initial check-in survey about life conflicts that they're dealing with and their ability to be successful in the semester. There's so much going on right now, and we've heard a lot recently out on the interwebs, if you will, about trauma-informed teaching and pedagogy and how we can really help our students be successful. So they might share with you that they're taking care of children or parents while they're dealing with school, that they work full-time or have additional work burden that semester. They may even share some personal information about an illness or depression or anxiety. These aren't meant to be excuses. These are meant to be ways that can help you understand where your students are at and have empathy for them. You can also use check-ins to learn about your students academically. Understanding their prior knowledge or preconceptions can help you scaffold content as you go through the course. Also, getting to know the sense of topics they're struggling with can help you to spend a bit of time on a subject or go back and clarify a point. Finally, asking for feedback from your students on your own performance and the course content can really help you improve your teaching. Sometimes we get blinders on and can't see the student perspective on how our course is laid out or how we are communicating the requirements for an assignment. So checking in with your students for their input can really help you with avoiding misunderstandings or frustrations. So what do you do with the results? Josh made a great point that you do need to make sure you're following up on the feedback that you receive. This can help you be more aware of students that are struggling in the semester. And I'm sure you're all aware of the Students of Concern process available through Student Life, but we'll provide the link here too. For many students though, it's just that their professor is aware of them personally, and it really helps them to feel like they aren't alone in the online course environment. Several students have shared with us that that's the first time that a professor has reached out to them personally, and it really helps them and means a lot to them. It gives you an opportunity for continual improvement as well. A great example of this is the left-hand navigation that we have in the Course Design Institute. Trina and I wanted to keep it very, very clean and simple. And we had just the home page and the modules, but participants shared with us that it helped them to have the discussion link on the left-hand side, rather than having to scroll through the modules to find the discussion location. So we added a very easy fix, but it helped that student and probably others with that fix. It's okay to make small changes during the semester when you receive feedback. Let your students know that you're making that change and why. If the pivot helps you the rest of the semester be more successful, by all means pivot. It's okay to not make a change as well. But if you've asked for feedback on it, it's important that you let your students know why you're not making that change, and maybe go ahead and kind of go over the reasons for it again. We're always here to help support you. If you're wondering how things might come across to students, definitely check the student view within Canvas or have a colleague kind of look over your course. Like I said before, we kind of get blinders on and we don't know how it appears to others. So getting an outsider's perspective can really help. Trina and I are available to do course reviews if you have any interest in having someone do that. Those are completely non-judgmental and only are shared with you, but it can give you some ideas on course improvement. So Trina's going to provide our email address as well. Oops. Okay, so how do we implement student check-ins? There's so many different ways, and it can be anonymous or specific to the students, so you know who's giving you the feedback. It can be private replies, or it can be an open course discussion. We've known several professors who have done one-on-one meetings for just 10 minutes with students on the phone or with Zoom to begin to establish that rapport. You can do that just once or several times throughout the semester. Students are often intimidated by coming to office hours, so consider taking some of that time and making intentional outreach. Midterm is certainly a good time to do a check-in since there's still time to make changes if needed. And really, it's as simple as taking a step or two beyond, does anyone have any questions about the final paper? And all you hear crickets chirping, right? Think about specific questions you could ask or give folks the opportunity to just answer a really simple anonymous poll of no questions, I'm going to ace this, I'm feeling okay, or still not clear what to do. That can let you know that you do need to kind of explain a little bit further. So what kind of tools should I use? We have several different ones listed here, and there's amazing different lists of tools right out there, right? But as we always say with technology, pick what you are most comfortable and use it sparingly and only when it's really appropriate. Don't use technology for technology's sake. Make sure that it really is appropriate for the purpose that you're doing. And depending on what you use, students can either respond anonymously or it can come directly to you either way. You can open up the feedback so everyone can see the results. And that can actually help students feel less isolated too, to know that other students are struggling with kind of the same areas that they are. Now I'm going to turn it over to Trina to share a particular method of student check-ins that she learned about last year. You're muted.
Just realized that. So just as there are a lot of tools you can use, there are lots of ways to set up student check-ins. So like we've said, these can be very flexible. I'm just going to provide one example. So last year, I was able to take advantage of a professional development opportunity. And I went to the eLearn conference and I met Timothy Marquis there from Virginia Commonwealth University. And they had had some success with a 3-part evaluation tool. And he presented it at that conference and made the document available under Creative Commons. So I had already provided that handout in the chat. And so as I mentioned, this is a 3-part evaluation process for each course. So the 3-part evaluation begins by looking at course design. These are Likert scale questions, and they're asked about whether or not the student has had a chance to get to know the instructor and fellow students, if they understand how to make contact, if they understand policies, how to navigate around the course and engage with the content. Each of the surveys also end with an open-ended question, what has worked well for the student, basically is asked at the end of each one. So then the second part of this is the engagement, and that focuses in more on how the student's connecting with the content, with their own experiences, with real life situations, It also asks about how well the students have connected with the instructor as well as other students in the class. So finally, the assessment portion, this would come near the end of the semester. So the way they had it set up was pretty much, a third of each semester. So this is a good summary of how the student engaged with the content, how they felt about the assessment process, how they felt the assessment process connected with or reflected their own learning. Again, you can see that open-ended question at the end. So again, I put that in the chat. Sorry, I learned something new about Zoom today. If you open a file, it goes immediate in the chat. I thought I would have to send it. So sorry if that was distracting. I sent it earlier than I wanted to. So I'll let you look at that. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi and to let her talk about her experiences with student check-ins.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Laura and Trina, for asking me to be part of this. I'm a big fan of Global Campus and the support you guys provide us online instructors. I have used check-ins, and it's kind of funny because I never knew that was a thing. It was something I just did. And so when Trina and Laura asked me, I'm like, oh, that's a thing. Anyway, so I'm always wanting to reach out to my students, and the nice thing is you don't have to have some big plan. I mean, what Trina just described, my ears perked up. I'm like, I want to learn more about that, but it seemed very big, and it seemed, and I'm not putting that down. So please don't feel like you have to do some big, planning months in advance of what the questions are going to be like and so forth. To me, for my classes, it's much more of a, I wonder if students are worried about this. And then I ask them, right? So this fall, this is what you see on the screen is just an example of something I did this fall in my FNDH 130 class, which is a careers in nutrition and dietetics class, 1 credit hour course. Well, because of needing to plan to pivot to completely online, because I have both campus and online courses, I really designed my course, my campus course, it is the same as my online course. But what I did then was have these participation sessions. And so that was their class time. So my class students come once a week to these sessions. And then I made them for my online sessions too. So I was trying to be fair to both sides. Anyway, so this survey was asking them if these sessions and the grading of them, because I did put some point values to them, what they thought about that. And so it worked really well. I mean, I kind of had this thought, and I threw the survey out there, and within a week I had, and you can see there was 63 responses at the top of that image. And I think I had 75 people in the class. So really I had a good response rate. And I think part of the reason was this. Okay, so I do most of my classes with an asynchronous mindset, because to me, Global Campus students picked online education for a reason. So I try to keep most everything asynchronous so that they can feel like they can be involved at 2 in the morning if need be. When I ask questions, I like a mix of multiple choice and typed, meaning I always have that last question like Lauren Trina talked about that's open-ended. And I get so much from the open-ended. And it's not just, what else do you want to tell me? It usually is a focused question. And really, I think if you're focused versus how are you doing, you get much more feedback, because they don't know what to tell you if you just say how they're doing. So if you get very focused with how you ask your questions, I think that helps. And the incentive. So the incentive is maybe it's too small to read, but in my survey at the top, it says, hey, I want to know what you think about these sessions, because before I change it, and I kind of tell them that, hey, if you want to have a say in how I change this. And so there's this incentive to them to reach out and give their opinion. Of course, provide a deadline. Please let me know by Friday. Now with Google Forms, it just sits out there, right? So I watched it over about a week, and that's where I got 63. I just checked again a couple days ago, and it's still 63. But anyway, you can actually turn Google Forms off and have a set deadline. But anyway, I think a deadline, tell them a deadline is good. And I agree, share the results. So I immediately, as soon as I got those results, I usually communicate with my students mostly through announcements in Canvas. And I tell them from day one, you need to set your announcements up to go to your email. That's not a default. So I spend a lot of time saying, you got to set that up. And I tell them, this is how I communicate with you. And so in that announcement, I actually gave them the results. And I told them, here's what I'm going to change based on your guys' input. So that's just one example. I do something very similar with my T-Vals even. All of my T-Vals have additional questions I add, and at least 2 of those are open-ended. And I am amazed at the answers I get. And again, they're not just open-ended how you do, or what did, it's focused. It's usually something, it might be one semester I ask about the textbook. I really want to know, did you guys use it? Did you guys read it? Or did you take the class without it? You know, tell me honestly. I spend a lot of time telling them, you know, if you can't tell us, we can't change unless you guys tell us. So I try to empower them to feel that, you know, this is a partnership here. This isn't you paying tuition, you earning a grade. It's a partnership. We love to teach. You want to learn. Let's do it together. So anyway, so that's just one example, and I love doing it. Mine is always very small. It's very quick. I just do it, and it helps me feel like I engage with my students a little more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heidi. That was great. So we're going to switch now and start sharing some ideas of how you are doing this and how we could do it more. Trina will add the link to this Padlet. And for those of you who haven't used Padlet before, it's pretty easy tool to use. You see the plus symbols. Whoops, sorry. Go back. The plus symbols just below each of those headers there, and you can add basically a sticky note of your thoughts, and we already have a few populated on the Padlet to start with. So let's go ahead and navigate to that Padlet right now. Let me grab the link myself. And I'm going to talk through as we kind of add some of these things and talk through some of the pieces that are already added there. So let me reshare my screen real quick. All right, so we talked with a group that Heidi's a part of, that Trina and I are a part of. We call the teaching team, which is just a small community of professors who are learning from each other, sharing ideas, sharing struggles, and kind of getting ideas out there so that we can really improve ourselves. And so we got ideas from that group. Katie, Linda, and Kathleen shared with us these ideas. So Kathleen Haas-Cruz uses a bank of surveys and articles, and she'd be more than happy to share those. She provided one to us, which is the article, The Promoting Student Metacognition, in the Other Thoughts column. So take a look at that. And that really ties back to the method that Trina was talking about, that really helps the students think about their own investment in the course. Katie Sigmund provided a bunch of great pointers that how important it is to share the feedback with your students. It shows you're listening and care about their experience. Changes don't have to be big. Most of the time they're really small. You know, maybe you decide to drop a couple of participation points or the lowest quiz grade based on how students are doing that semester, or how they're struggling that semester. So that can really help students feel like you're aware of their circumstances. And then also thinking about if you aren't going to make a change that they're requesting, still providing them information about why you're doing that and why it is the way it is. I mean, it could be, you know, something to do with your accreditation. You have to do this in this course to make sure that the program overall, you know, those kinds of things. And she always includes a question about what students do not like about their course that she cannot change. Gives the students a chance to vent and an opportunity to bond over something that's less than ideal. And her examples were a stinky room or the pandemic itself, right? Very frustrating things, but students sometimes just need that chance to vent and be heard. And then finally, Linda Yarrow shared a very simple University of Texas Austin survey that is open source. That very simple. It's 3 questions. Overall, this course or assignment has provided an effective learning experience. Either they agree, disagree, or neither. What's been the most helpful in your learning in the class so far? What has caused you the most difficulty in the learning in the class so far? So pretty generic, and Heidi's right. Getting more specific can really help the students know how to respond, but it really can be as simple as this. You can go as complex as the great format that Trina shared earlier, or as simple as this. Just trying to check in with your students on where they're at. So I would encourage you to unmute yourself and share any ideas. And thank you so much for those that have been typing in ideas on the timing and different ways to ask questions. I see that, you know, doing it as needed, weekly or by unit, that's excellent.
Laura,
Uh-huh.
this is Heidi. I just did the thought. Only thing I wanted to add, by the way, I've never used Padlet's kind of cool.
It is fun, isn't it?
You know, somebody earlier, I think it was Joshua that asked or said, you know, finding the time. It is so overwhelming because there are so many neat little tools out there, and you can spend an entire week exploring tools that you might use, and it might be a tool you're going to use for this little 1 minute of something. And so it's so easy to not check in because it's not that it takes a lot of time, it just takes thought, and we're educators, right? So we're always thinking the big picture, and we're thinking, well, I need to plan this and I need to plan that, and in the end we just want to get our course done because that's what we're paid to do. So I try to sort of force myself, and when I design my class, I try to think of how am I going to talk to the students since it's online, how am I going to engage with them? So I force myself to have a method of engaging, whether it be like I provide, after I grade things, I provide this feedback document. So it's like the things I would have said to the class sitting here. Hey guys, here's the assignment. You guys were terrible at this. This is what we need to fix. You know, it's that kind of stuff to where they can, it's not that I'm giving individual feedback to everyone because I have large classes, but I can give them some generic, hey, these are the problems I'm seeing. And so then they can sort of self-reflect, oh yeah, I had that problem and that's how to fix it. But anyway, it's sort of, to me, online teaching is all preloaded. You have to think about it when you design your class. And so if you can think about, how can I engage with them with these little check-ins and surveys? And then you just sort of tell yourself, okay, I understood how to use Google Forms, so that's why I use it. It's simple, it takes 30 seconds. It's very, for a person like me who's not a tech, I make it, it's there, it saves automatically. I never lose anything. I don't even understand when I open Google Docs, it knows who I am, which is freaky, but you know, that's okay. So anyway, so I agree with Joshua, it's hard to fit it all in, but if you kind of plan it ahead and have something like Google Forms or one of these other little things that can just be easy to do, and maybe once a month, just do one thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. It does need to be intentional. If it's important to us to both connect with our students and to help them feel that we're engaged and want to learn more about them. And it really can help them you know, feel that investment that we have, because you all spend so much time building these courses and teaching these students. You know, the more you can get feedback back from them that it's working, the better off you are, right? You're going to feel more confident and improve where you can. Any
Hey,
other
Laura,
thoughts?
one other thing I thought I'd throw out there. So I'm a program director of the didactic program in dietetics. And so we gather a lot of feedback that we need to for our accreditation because we're accredited by a different accrediting body. And one of the things we hear consistently is students are in a certain class and then they'll reach out to me saying, you know what, I'm struggling in this class. I've reached out to the professor. They're not responding to my emails. You know, it takes them 2 weeks to respond to my emails. So my point is that it's that feeling that no one cares about them. And so any of these little check-ins help that student feel like, hey, yeah, you know, you're paying me and I am here and I am listening to you. You know, I try to have a rule that I answer every email within 24 hours, except on weekends. And even if it's a response of, I can't take time right now, but I did get your email, I will respond by the end of the week. Yes, it takes extra time. I've kept a time log for the last starting in January of this year. And it's amazing. 1/3 of my time is spent on emails. But that's what my job is to interact with students. And then I figured out that of my emails, about 1/3 of them are my teaching, 1/3 are administrative for my program director. So it's kind of interesting to see that time log but that email is part of that. That's student engagement. So.
That's a fantastic point about checking in and making the students feel heard and making them know that you're there and that, you know, that level of care that you have for your students. Thank you. Are you ready to move on from the Padlet?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go back to the presentation.
Okay. So we've already kind of touched on things throughout this conversation. We've had we've talked some about the whys, the whats, the hows, the whens of student check-ins, but before we wrap up, we just wanted to give a reminder that not just in the case of student check-ins, but that continuous improvement in teaching requires a sincere approach to wanting that improvement. And it requires that we be open to the feedback and sometimes criticism, which requires a level of vulnerability on our part. So I know I'm always learning and often learn best from my mistakes. And that's humbling, but it also helps you grow. And I just want to again thank you for taking your time today to spend with us on this topic. And Laura and I would both welcome any feedback you would like to provide. And we are available anytime for questions. Again, it's gcid@ksu.edu, reaches both of us. So we've provided this information and resources from Heidi, Kathleen, Katie, and Linda. They all contributed to our slides. So we wanted to provide their contact information on this final slide and just open it back up for questions or comments.
They are all open to you reaching out individually to them if you're interested in talking with them. So
I do have one other thought. I loved, Trina, when you talked about being open to criticism. And, you know, it's funny because it's one of those things where I'm like, well, who wouldn't be? To me, it's just my internal character is like, who wouldn't want somebody to say, you know what, you really need to fix that. And so I try to portray that to my students is that, again, we're a partnership here because we have to role model to our students that, yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You're a student, for gosh sakes. That's why you're in school. So we need to be able to show them that, you know, I'm human too. I make mistakes and I can learn from them. That we get a lot of, in certain fields, dietetics, one of them, a lot of type A, and they want to be perfect. It's like, no, I don't expect you to be perfect, but I expect you to take accountability for your mistakes, learn from them. Anyway, so I feel like I love that you brought that up, Trina, because we have to be able to say, yeah, I can always improve. So.
Yeah, being willing to be vulnerable with them as well, I think is really, really important so that they get that sense that it's okay not to be perfect. Because you're right, there are a lot of high achievers at the college level that have struggles with admitting that they don't know the answers. And that's one of the struggles of office hours that we've talked about a lot in the past. You know, understanding that your professor is human and they are there and they do want to help, right? So, but walking up and walking into that office is a little intimidating to start with. So how can we change the environment of that office hours and make it more accessible to students? Any other thoughts from the group?
Shellen had a comment about the handout that I passed along from VCU and mentioned the I statements. And I meant to mention that on the slide, that it does put a lot of the learning in the students, you know, as a student's responsibility. Like, what are you doing to engage yourself? What are you doing to connect? And that, I'm glad Shellen brought that up because I meant to mention that.
Yeah, that's a big part of the metacognition. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the TVAL responses of, you suck, right? Thanks, that doesn't help me. How do we improve, right? Give me feedback that really helps make a difference rather than I hated this course. You know, what can we do to make things better? And so making it be that I statement and having students take some ownership in that, you know, maybe they'll think a little bit more carefully about the feedback that they provide too.
You know, in response to that, in my syllabus, I have 2 quotes, and I can't quote them at the moment, but because they're in the syllabus, I don't have to memorize them. But I spend a lot of time telling the students and say, look, it's not my job to teach you. It's my job to build a class that exposes you to the right readings and activities so that you can learn. And so I let them know, and it's kind of the flipped classroom. I love it because that's really how I've always taught. I just didn't even know it really had a name, is that, you know, it's our job to pull from all this worldly stuff out there. Here's the stuff that's related to the topic of this course. Now I want you to explore this and talk about it in these assignments and reading, and then come back to me with questions. And it's not really, I don't say come back to me with questions, but you know, I'm trying to say to them that I expect you to do the learning. This isn't a I teach it, you spit it out on a test class. And so if you, again, it's that forward design, that your course is designed that way. Like I said, it's in my syllabus. I talk about it for the first 2 weeks of class. And so I really kind of put it on them, not in a threatening, mean way, but in a, you know, you should want this. This is what you're paying for. A lot of times I'll say that, you know, you're paying tuition, and part of that is to learn. And how do you learn? Well, you learn by doing the stuff I ask you to do, but you have to do it. I can't do it for you. Anyway, so yeah, it's kind of related to that.
Definitely.
Sorry, I can't remember the quotes. Maybe I can. My syllabus to Lauren. It's something about, you know, teaching isn't, it's the filling of a bucket, it's the lighting of a fire. I don't remember.
Yeah, so I have a question.
Yeah.
In this time, we've got so many people who work over the weekends, and these are students, these are teachers, these are administrators, and part of the job is to not burn out. So how do you put limits on that? So I did hear Heidi say something about, well, within, I think 24 hours or something, but not considering the weekend. So I was just curious how you'd all respond.
Well, I can respond to my comment. So in the syllabus, I say, I will respond to your email within 24 hours, unless it comes late Friday afternoon. Leave that one really vague. Late Friday afternoon or the weekend, I will respond to those on Monday. And as far as burnout, one of the things that I've done this year, like I said, I'm doing this time study to where I'm logging all of my hours. Can't wait to be done with it. But, you know, I have some 60-hour weeks, I have some 70-hour weeks, and I have some 20-hour weeks, you know, so I try to be cognizant how I'm feeling. And I know ahead of time that October is an 80-hour week month and August is a 30-hour week month. It's just, I kind of go at it with that mindset, and I'm okay with that. And, you know, I think a lot of people, when they first get into teaching, I don't know what spot you're into it, is that I even felt this way at the beginning. I had to work 40 hours a week. You know, that was what I was supposed to be doing. And I realized that really in higher education, it isn't. It's, you know, get your job done. And if you can do it in 20 hours instead of 40, then more power to you. But I have to control it myself and just saying, hey, you know what? I worked 80 hours last week. So yeah, I'm going to take some calm time this week. Because as instructors, we don't have a clock. We don't clock in, we don't clock out. And so I can do that. And if I have a Friday, I'm not doing any work, it's because last week I did 80 hours. And so, yeah, I'm taking a day off, and I don't turn that in as vacation time because I already did the time last week. And so it's a different concept that sometimes coming from outside higher ed, people kind of freak about, but
it's harder to understand. Yeah. I think that it's key that you spend the time to think through that weekend time, right? If you're making all of your assignments due on Sunday at 11:59, you probably need to at least be checking your email to make sure that students aren't like completely freaking out and the assignment isn't there and, you know, nobody understands anything, right? But if you've communicated to your students that if you have questions, you need to let me know by Thursday, then you have, you know, some flexibility, and also being flexible with the deadline on Monday or Tuesday, right? If there was some sort of difficulty. But it is okay to tell your students, I am not available 24/7. I am a human being with a life. I think a lot of, especially new online instructors, really struggle with that.
you know, one way around that deadline, I agree with you, Laura, that you need to be available. So how I do my modules, most of my modules, well, I can't say that anymore. Some classes I have 1 week modules, and some week I have 2 week modules, or even longer, meaning open and stuff is due at the end. And I always make my due dates in all of my classes, whether they are 1 week, 2 week, 3 week modules. My due dates are always Mondays at 11:59. My reasoning is then they can get a hold of me on that day. That means though on Mondays, I have to be on my email, because if they have a question, for example, I had a student email me on Sunday about something that was due on Monday, and then I didn't read that email until today. So I responded to them and said, you know what, that's my fault that I didn't get back with you before the deadline. You know, she asked about a particular question. I said, don't worry about it. I won't let that affect your grade, kind of a thing. So I still responded to them, but having that due date on Mondays at 11:59 allows them to get back with me. And then I have my modules overlap. So all of my modules open on Sunday at 12:01 a.m. and then they end on a Monday at 11:59. And I do that on purpose so that people can, you know, there's people that work on weekends and are off doing their school during the week, and then the opposite. So that way they can plan around just knowing when my due dates are and when the module opens. And I try to do that the same all the time so they can just get familiar with it. And then they just know that all my due dates are on Mondays. So.
That's a great point, really a great point. And your students often take more than one course from you, so they learn that and become familiar with that. But that is because you've learned your students, right? And you know from their feedback, having that weekend time on kind of both ends can really help them be successful. So I like that.